Welcome aboard the USS Midway Aircraft Carrier Museum in San Diego, California. My name's Rudy Shappee. I served aboard 3 aircraft carriers during my 20-year career in the U.S. Navy. During that time, I was responsible for the management of a number of flight deck personnel aboard 2 of those carriers. Today, I'm going to take you on a tour of this massive flight deck aboard what was once the largest aircraft carrier in the world. Built during the final days of World War II, the USS Midway played a major role in protecting American interests during the Cold War era. Hear that? That's 3 inches of solid steel. The USS Midway was the first U.S. aircraft carrier to have a solid steel flight deck. Before she was built in 1945, U.S. carriers had flight decks made of wood. At just over 1,000 feet in length, the flight deck covers an area of 4.2 acres. That's enough room to fit just over 3 football fields. When she was an active carrier, the Midway had a crew of approximately 4,500 officers and men living and working together. The flight deck is where high-powered aircraft launch and land aboard the carrier. It's considered to be the most dangerous place to work in the world. And right now, we're in the aircraft launching area. From an aerial view, we're here, the place where the aircraft are catapulted off the ship. This big spear-looking device is a catapult piston. 2 of these, located under the flight deck, work together to launch an aircraft. The result is both dynamic and thrilling. High-pressure steam is released into the catapult, driving the pistons forward and launching the aircraft. Aircraft weighing as much as 78,000 pounds are catapulted down a 250-foot track. And in just 2.5 seconds, an aircraft can reach as much as 160 miles an hour. Now that's quite a ride in anybody's book. The first step in preparing an aircraft for launching is to position it over the catapult. An aircraft director guides an aircraft onto the catapult, and the jet blast deflector is raised to redirect the jet's exhaust and heat gases upward so the aircraft behind it isn't damaged or the crew injured. Then the aircraft is connected to the catapult shuttle blade. A holdback assembly is installed between the aircraft and the flight deck to keep the aircraft from rolling forward when the pilot advances its engines to full power. Now notice how the catapult shuttle is then moved forward, taking up any slack, putting the catapult into tension and ready to fire. The leader of the launch crew is the catapult officer, who signals the pilot to advance his engines to full power. And the pilot signals he is ready to be catapulted off the ship by saluting the catapult officer. Then the catapult officer gives the signal to fire the catapult. This life-size model demonstrates the proper position. 1 knee on the deck, arm extended towards the bow. You can see why we refer to the catapult officer as a shooter. The deck edge catapult operator pushes the fire button on the control console. The catapult fires, and the aircraft is on its way. The catapult crew is trained to launch an aircraft every 90 seconds. So with 2 catapults, it's possible to launch an aircraft every 45 seconds. Aircraft that are not used on the flight deck are stored below on the hangar deck. But how do we get them from here to there? We use aircraft elevators. This is one of 3 aboard the Midway. From an aerial view, this elevator is on the starboard side of the flight deck, forward of the island superstructure. This video shows an aircraft elevator in action. It takes only about 20 seconds to bring aircraft up or down. These giant elevators can lift 130,000 pounds. That's 2 fully loaded aircraft, or equal to the weight of about 860 adults. In addition to the aircraft elevators, the Midway has many other moving parts, including the flight deck itself. Come on, I'll show you. This is one of 3 expansion joints that separate the flight deck into separate sections and allows them to move against each other. Looking down on the flight deck, you can see the 3 joints that create 4 distinct sections. We're here on this one. Expansion joints are critical and that they allow the flight deck to flex to absorb the power of pounding waves and high winds. When you look at photos of the Midway in a storm, remember, if it weren't for the expansion joints, the flight deck would have cracked under the strain exerted by the forces of the sea. The shape of Midway's flight deck has changed over time. I'm standing right on what would have been the edge of the flight deck when the ship was built in 1945. If I took one step to my right, I would have fallen into the water. From a bird's eye view, we are here. This section of the flight deck didn't exist when the Midway was completed in 1945. The original flight deck measured 2.67 acres, but that wasn't enough room to land jet aircraft when they were introduced into the fleet. So another 1.5 acres were added, expanding the flight deck to 4.2 acres. Here's the Midway before the addition, and the Midway after the addition. The result? Enough space to have separate launching and landing areas with the takeoffs up forward and the touchdowns along the angled deck further aft, making the flight deck a much safer place. We mostly think of the flight deck as being flat, and it is, except for this huge structure behind me called the superstructure. We sailors call it the island. Looking at the flight deck from above, the island is right here, on the right or starboard side of the ship. It rises 7 deck levels above the flight deck and contains the command and control functions of the carrier, such as navigation and aircraft operations. The island supports the ship's mast, antennas, lookout stations, and flag hoists. This large smokestack discharges exhaust gases from the ship's boilers. The entire operation of the ship is the responsibility of one person, the captain. See the upper row of windows? That's the navigation bridge, where the captain is located when the ship is at sea. He is surrounded by a team of officers and men who control the operation of the ship. All commands originate here. Just below the navigation bridge is the flag or admiral's bridge. The admiral is in command of all of the ships in the carrier task group. A carrier needs support ships, and they always travel together. Those letters painted on the side of the island all mean something. Each one of them is a Bravo Zulu, or in the terms for a layman, an attaboy for the ship and the crew. The white E is the Battle Efficiency Award for Best Ship Employment during annual fleet-wide trials. The ship earned this award 9 times during its career. The yellow E is the Air Department Excellence Award. The green E is the Operations Department Excellence Award. The DC is the Damage Control Excellence Award. And the W is the Weapons Department Excellence Award. That white wheel is the Navigation Department Excellence Award. Talk about a can-do ship, but wait, there's more. Those red aircraft silhouettes represent the enemy MiG aircraft shot down by the ship's air wing during the Vietnam War. And finally, that big white number 41 indicates that Midway is the 41st aircraft carrier authorized by the Congress of the United States. Looking further aft is another glass enclosed area. That's primary flight control, where the air boss and his team control flight deck operations. That's like the control tower in an airport. Just below that room is a curved glass area. That's the location of a television camera used to record all takeoffs and landings for use in pilot debriefings and accident investigations. All the way aft is a radar antenna, making a 360-degree sweep to detect ships and aircraft as far away as 200 miles. Over the years, the Midways had many hard-working crew members who played critical roles, approximately 200 of them here on the flight deck. This exhibit shows the colorful uniforms worn by the flight deck personnel. From a bird's eye view, the exhibit is on the aft end of the island. Why all the bright colors? Because on a noisy flight deck, it's important to be able to see and know the job every person does. Crew members wearing the yellow jersey are aircraft directors. They use hand signals to direct pilots where to move their aircraft. Others wearing yellow jerseys include the catapult officers. They are responsible for launching of the aircraft. And the arresting gear officers are responsible for the equipment that traps an aircraft during landing. Personnel wearing purple shirts are responsible for fueling and defueling the aircraft. Brown shirts are plane captains, responsible for making sure the aircraft are ready for flight and assisting the pilots into and out of the aircraft. Crew members wearing a white jersey fill a number of roles. Quality assurance personnel check the aircraft to make sure it's ready for flight and give the catapult officer the thumbs up, communicating the aircraft is clear. Medical personnel are at the ready to treat any injuries. During a landing signal officers communicate with pilots as they approach the landing area. Red-shirted personnel are responsible for loading ordnance onto or off of the aircraft. Crash and salvage personnel wear red jerseys, plus protective clothing. They respond to emergencies such as a crash or fire. Green shirts operate the flight deck equipment, and there are more green jerseys on the flight deck than any other color. They run the catapult and arresting gear. Others, called air wing maintenance personnel, stand by ready to perform quick fixes if needed on an aircraft prior to launch. This crew member, wearing a blue shirt, is responsible for moving the aircraft around the flight deck. The chain he carries is one of many that are used to secure aircraft in place. Blue shirts also drive tow tractors to move aircraft around the deck. Landing an aircraft on a carrier takes both skill and precision. I'm now standing in the landing area of the flight deck. Remember, from an aerial view, the launch area is here. We're here now, where the aircraft touched down. The landing area is just 80 feet wide by about 680 feet long, end to end. It's marked by a yellow and white center line down the middle and white ladder lines along its outer edges. Right here, embedded in the deck on the center line of the landing area, is a television camera. The camera records a head-on view of an aircraft's approach and landing. Pilots can review the footage to learn and improve their landing techniques. Or, if there's an accident during a landing, investigators will use the footage to help them determine what went wrong. Right here, at the aft end of the landing area, is the touchdown zone. You can actually see scrapes in the deck made by aircraft touching down. Looking down on the midway, the touchdown zone is here, an area about the size of a tennis court, 40 feet wide by 80 feet long. Here, 3 wires or arresting gear cables are stretched across the flight deck. I have a piece of one here. You can see how thick they are. They're made of twisted steel wires. Let's watch an actual landing and see what happens. Did you see it? A special device on the aircraft grabs the wire and traps the aircraft. That device is a tail hook, and this is one right here. That hook actually grabs the wire. Once the aircraft is engaged, a massive engine below the flight deck stops the aircraft. This happens in fewer than 3 seconds. Amazing when you consider the aircraft is going 150 miles an hour. And the aircraft stops within only 350 feet. However, if an aircraft misses the wires, the pilot throttles up and flies around for another try. Once the aircraft is trapped, the pilot raises his tailhook, disengaging the aircraft from the wire, and taxis clear of the recovery area. The wires are then quickly pulled back into position for the next landing. The flight deck crew is trained to recover an aircraft every 45 seconds. But how do pilots land their aircraft with such precision in such a small area? They depend on this, an array of lights called the Fresnel lens landing system. Looking straight down on the midway, the Fresnel lens is on the port side of the flight deck, where a pilot can easily see it upon approach. This exhibit aboard the flight deck of the Midway demonstrates how the Fresnel lens system assists a pilot in landing. The row of green lights represents the horizon. The amber lights in the middle, referred to as the meatball, appear to move vertically. The pilot's goal? Keep the meatball right in the center of the row of green lights when approaching the landing area. This is what it looks like from the pilot's perspective. There's the Fresnel lens. Keep your eye on it. The meatball is slightly above the horizon bar. The aircraft's a little high, too high. The meatball's above the green lights. The pilot adjusts and brings it down for a perfect landing. If this pilot is off the mark, the tailhook will miss the arresting wires and the pilot will have to go around to make another attempt. If the pilot is at risk of crashing the aircraft, these red lights on the Fresnel lens landing system flash to tell the pilot to abort the landing. Sounds simple, huh? Well, let me tell you something. There are people who say that there are more doctors qualified to perform brain surgery in the world than there are pilots who are qualified to use this system to land aboard a carrier. That's why U.S. naval carrier pilots are considered to be the best in the world. To land their aircraft safely, pilots depend upon other pilots on the flight deck called landing signals officers, or LSOs. I'm standing on the platform where LSOs position themselves during landings. From an aerial view, the LSO platform is here, at the side of the landing area, providing the best possible view of the approaching aircraft. This platform is equipped with communications and aircraft status equipment. LSOs use this during the recovery of approaching aircraft. This cutout of an LSO wearing a white jersey shows him talking with a pilot and telling him to adjust the aircraft speed and altitude as necessary. See that device he's holding over his head? That's the pickle switch. The LSO uses that to turn on the red warning lights on the Fresnel lens landing system if he sees a pilot is in danger of crashing. Video shows the landing signal officers doing their jobs on the LSO platform. The role they play is critical to the safe landing of every aircraft aboard the carrier. And when the job on the flight deck is done, the LSOs will meet with the pilots to critique their approaches and landing. We just completed our tour of the flight deck of the USS Midway Aircraft Carrier Museum in San Diego. We learned where and how aircraft are catapulted into the air. We saw how aircraft are moved between the hangar and the flight deck. We learned how expansion joints keep the flight deck from cracking. We explored the ship's island and the meaning of the symbols. We learned about the different jobs of the flight deck personnel and why they wear bright-colored jerseys. We saw how the Fresnel lens and the LSOs assist pilots with their landings, and the precision it takes for a pilot to drop the tailhook and grab one of those wires in such a small area. During my career in the Navy, I supervised flight deck personnel both launching and recovering aircraft on 2 aircraft carriers. I can tell you, it was some of the most exciting experiences in my life. It's been my pleasure today to share some of that excitement with you as we've toured the flight deck of the USS Midway Aircraft Carrier Museum.